I'm Jeremy Goodwin. Now, the return of our monthly Soundbites segment with Sauce Magazine. Zahra Spencer and Telie Woods started out in different worlds, but came together in St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands to realize their dream of running a restaurant. After a lot of hard work and two of the strongest hurricanes on record to hit the Caribbean, they made their way to St. Louis and opened up shop last year. Sauce Magazine tells their story in its July issue. Joining me on the phone to talk about all this are Telie Woods. Thanks for joining us, Telie.
Hi, how are you today?
Hey, good afternoon. And
Awesome.
yeah, Zahra Spencer is with us too. Welcome to the program.
Hi, how are you?
We all here? We're all ready to talk about some jerk soul? Excellent. Telie, you're originally from Chicago, so how do you end up in the Virgin Islands?
Well, I ended up in the Virgin Islands strictly because of two reasons. The number one reason was Zahra. I had decided to leave the States and move to the islands and kind of live that island life that a lot of people kind of dream about. And so I wanted to do that with her. And so that's really the biggest thing that made me decide to move there. But we also definitely had plans even before I moved. We started to plan around making a dream come to fruition, which is owning a restaurant. So while I was still in Chicago and she was on St. Thomas, she was kind of looking around for a space for us. And once we found a space, I decided to move.
Yeah. And Zahra, your Caribbean roots are very strong. You were born in St. Croix. Your mother's Jamaican. Your father's from Antigua. How did you wind up bumping into Telie in St. Thomas?
Well, when Telie visited, the world is big but very small because of social media and the internet. So we connected online and built a relationship from his interaction with me online, and became really good friends.
All right. So, Zahra, what's the plan that you came up with at the time in terms of opening up a restaurant?
Well, the idea came from Telie to really open a brick and mortar in the Virgin Islands. Our original idea was to have somewhat of a tourist spot for everyone who came off of the cruise ships, because St. Thomas is the number one cruise ship destination at the time. So we found a little shanty close to the beach where the cruise ships came, and we were going to give ice creams and cool little treats for people who came off the ship with a Caribbean twist. And that slowly changed when Hurricane Maria decided to roam through the Caribbean.
Yeah, and that was 2017. You were, I think, getting ready to open up or making plans for the restaurant, and then Hurricane Irma happens. 2 weeks later, Hurricane Maria. Zahra, you had made it through hurricanes before, right? How were these ones different?
Living in the Caribbean all my life, hurricanes is a part of, the situation because of where we're located, right above the Lesser Antilles. We are the prime spot. The Virgin Islands is in a prime spot for frequent hurricane interactions. And when I was younger, I remember one distinctly that was close to the severity of Maria and Irma, which was Hurricane Hugo. I was about 5 or 6 years old, and it was like island-wide devastation. Everybody lost their roof. Everybody was without power for months, up to a year. And it was just literally rebuilding the entire infrastructure of the island.
You remember that? You remember Hugo from when you were that little?
Yes, I remember, actually during the storm, I was sitting on the counter because the house was flooding. I remember that. I remember running from one area of the house to the other, and me and my little sister was in the tub, the bathroom tub, and my mom had like a mattress over us because the roof was coming off. I remember that. I remember after the storm and the National Guard and the Army came and they gave us like these packaged food that wasn't really that great. Like I remember all of that.
Okay. And then after this, the 1-2 punches of Irma and Maria, was that a similar impact on just daily life?
Well, I was much older for Maria and Irma, so given the experience of a few hurricanes in between those, I was actually very prepared for Irma and Maria, even though you never know fully how much devastation will happen at any hurricane. Just given the fact that I've been through a few hurricanes before, I was more prepared for that one.
Okay. But basically, it's not a great environment to be starting a restaurant or any business at that moment in time.
No, because you have no electricity, you have little to no cell service. All the luxuries that you take for granted in a normal society is very scarce. Food becomes scarce. You have to learn how to, it's like almost camping again until, you get some sense of normalcy.
Okay. And you stayed behind to be close to your family at that point, right?
Yes. At the time when Telie left, the airport was non-existent. No planes could come in or out unless you were military personnel. So I knew I couldn't leave at that point because it would be months before I'd be able to see my family. And given the fact that Telie is from the mainland, he needed to leave to be with his family.
Yeah. Telie, you made it back to the U.S., but you're not from St. Louis. How did you wind up in St. Louis?
Yes, I'm not from St. Louis. I'm from Chicago. But I had a really good friend here in St. Louis. And once Zahra and I made the decision, that it made sense for me to kind of come back to the States to regroup, my good friend here just worked tirelessly just to really find me some kind of possible flight in the nearest airport. The nearest airport that wasn't trampled was Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually left St. Thomas on a small boat with a couple other refugees. And we went over to Puerto Rico. And, of course, everyone already knows what the storm did to Puerto Rico. But a good friend of mine was able to get me on one of the last flights out of Puerto Rico before the storm hit. The island. And to be honest with you, I really didn't care what city. I didn't even ask. I wasn't even thinking about it. It was such chaos going on the island. I mean, I could have got a ticket to anywhere, but she got me a ticket to St. Louis, and I ended up in St. Louis.
I guess the middle of the country sounded pretty good after what you had just been going through.
I love the middle of the country. I'm from Chicago.
Yeah.
We're the best.
Yeah. Zahra, so you get the idea together. You say maybe we'll bring this restaurant idea to St. Louis, Missouri. Zahra, you had just been through so much upheaval. How eager were you to pack up and move to a strange city and start this restaurant?
It wasn't that difficult in the beginning, even though because I went through several steps per se. Like I prayed about it, I fasted about it, and I always been like a risk taker and a go getter. And being the fact that I have an entrepreneurial spirit and Telie is the same way, it was you have to have risk to get great gain, and I was willing to take that risk with him.
Yeah.
So I've been through a few hurricanes. I knew my family was okay when I established communications. Our family home and businesses were fine. I was comfortable enough because after, I didn't leave the Virgin Islands until December, so I had a few months on island with my family, and I knew that they were okay. So coming back to the idea, was some form of normalcy for me, for us, because everything was like in total chaos for a while.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the restaurant, Jerk Soul, which you opened in Hyde Park and then moved to Cherokee Street. And just hearing the name, it seems like it evokes two whole worlds of cooking traditions. Uh, Telie, would you explain what mix of styles is represented by that name, Jerk Soul?
Well, Jerk Soul pretty much represents the mix of styles between Zahra and myself. So when we were able to bring our culinary ideas together, it was just kind of a combination of my culinary experience, her culinary background, and of course, with her being from the islands, that's kind of the jerk part of it. And with me, of course, being from the States, of course, soul food is huge when it comes down to the so-called Black community. So Jerk Soul is a combination of Zahra and Telie.
Can we tell some secrets? Where does the mac and cheese recipe come from?
It actually comes. Yeah, I could tell just a couple of secrets. But it actually comes from one of my cousins. One of my cousins by the name of Gina, who my family recently lost last year. Now, my grandma taught me a lot. I mean, just by getting home from school and watching her cook us lunch and dinner and breakfast and all that kind of good stuff. Just watching her really made my culinary experience just skyrocket. But not only my grandmother, but my aunt, my cousins and stuff, they all can cook. And so I knew my cousin Gina had a great recipe for macaroni. And, just kind of stole it from her.
Zahra, are there any family recipes in the mix for you?
Yeah, well, a lot of the food on the classic side of our menu are things that I grew up on and are things that my mom, my grandmother, my godparents taught me, because it was a rule of thumb. If you could eat, you could work. So even if you were a little child, you would at least cut some onions, or you would set the dining room table, and food was always a big experience for us, whether you have something good or bad going on, whether it's Sunday afternoon, whether it's every morning, we would come together around food. So the preparation of food was major in my family, and you had to take part at a young age. So like the saltfish, the oxtails, the curry chicken is all things I grew up on, coconut rice and peas, it's things I have all fond memories around with my family.
We are talking with Zahra Spencer and Telie Woods of Jerk Soul. Let's bring in another voice here. Heather Hughes Huff, managing editor of Sauce magazine. Heather, are you with us?
Yes, hello.
Hey, thanks for joining us. So,
Thanks for having me.
from your plate, what's distinctive about the blend of influences at Jerk Soul?
I think the thing that stuck out to us was there's not a lot of places in St. Louis that have such great Caribbean food, and to be able to combine that with really a lot of classics from Telly's background, it's the quality that you get there is really great. We reviewed them last year and have been sort of thinking about doing a story on these two for a long time. And after the coronavirus hit, we were trying to think of stories that were suited to right now, and covering the food scene in St. Louis and anywhere at this point is pretty rough going. And looking at their story and everything that they've gone through, it's just such a great example of the toughness of people in the food industry, and what people who run restaurants have to go through. This is a really extreme example, but it seemed to bring a lot of hope at a time where I think everyone's feeling at the end of their rope, and like their lives have just been hit by a hurricane, and to see what Zahra and Telie were able to build out of that experience is really valuable right now.
What do you recommend off the menu?
Oh, I love the curry chicken. That's my favorite thing. And the cabbage and mac and cheese are the sides that I go for.
That sounds like a good plan. How is St. Louis's game in terms of Caribbean food right now?
There are a few places. There's like a handful that make the rounds for us, but Jerk Soul is my personal favorite for sure.
Let's go back to the proprietors. Zahra, speaking about the moment that we're in right now, you have, in the context in which you're having this success with the restaurant, you've talked about watching the protest that followed the killing of Michael Brown Jr. in Ferguson in 2014 in the Virgin Islands on TV, and that it felt distant from your day-to-day life at the time. Living in St. Louis now, in this nationwide reckoning over racial injustice, how is all of that hitting you differently these days?
Well, because the people who are affected the most look like me, they sound like me, it affects me both then and now. But the difference is that I can actually walk down the street where it happened. Like a few weeks ago, there was a protest downtown, and I used to live downtown. So the situation hits home when you don't see the places on TV. I'm walking in the same place that these devastations happen, and it affects me in the sense that these killings that happen, these massacres that happen to these young people, is only by the grace of God. It's not me, because I look like these people. So it affects me personally in a great way. And everything I do now, I think differently because it could be me.
Mm-hmm. Telie, in our closing moments, do you want to add anything on that? Where do you see yourself in this movement?
Well, I see myself and Zahra and Jerk Soul just continuing to be advocates for justice. Not only advocates for justice, but also advocates for for good food as well. So it's just
Sure.
For us, it's just not about. Some people say food is life, and of course you need it to live. And food is extremely important. But when it comes down to situations like coronavirus, when it comes down to situations like racial injustice, those things are very, very extremely important to Zahra and myself. And so we want to do everything that we can possible just to be positive voices in either one of those aspects, whether it be racial injustice, how small business and people are affected by the virus. We just want to be kind of just a positive place where people can come and, you can chat with us about these things face to face. You can also, if you're having a bad day, or something like that, we just want Jerk Soul to kind of be that place where you can come in and by the time you walk out, you feel better.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. The clock on the wall tells me we need to leave it there, but thank you so much. I want to thank Zahra Spencer, Telie Woods, and Heather Hughes Huff for joining us today. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.